Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 6 of my JavaScript project tutorial series. In this part of the tutorial series, I'm going to teach you a ton about Canvas. I'm also going to show all of the trigonometry needed for games as well as graphics programming. And I'm going to do all of this while we create a complex project that's going to allow us to explore trigonometry. And now what I'm going to do is jump over and show you the finished project. Okay, so this is what we will be making. This guy is going to automatically come in here and draw all of these triangles and keep them in position as we go around moving our mouse. It's also going to put out all sorts of information. The X and Y here is going to be the X and Y position for the circle. Down here at the tip right here is going to be the X and Y for our canvas. It's also going to calculate both degrees as well as radians for our angle that we have right here. It's going to get the hypotenuse length, which never changes, of course, and also it's going to get the opposite length, which is the end of the triangle here. So a whole bunch of neat things. You're going to learn a lot about trigonometry, and now I'm going to jump over and start writing the code. Alright, so I'm using Visual Studio Code once again, and this is just the basic HTML. I don't want to waste any time with it here. What we're going to do is we are going to have our style sheet input, and here is going to be our style sheet name, which is mainstyle.css. Also going to get our JavaScript script right here and input it there. We're going to put a wrapper around our canvas so that everything will be centered. You can see right here where we have canvas and it's 600 by 600 in size. Also pay particular attention to my canvas as the ID because we will be referring to that. Then over in mainstyle.css, very simple. All I wanted to do here is keep everything centered, and that's exactly what this does right here. And now I'm going to jump over and start writing some JavaScript. Now, when I first start this, what I want to think about first are all of the variables that are going to be needed across all of my different functions I create. And I'm going to basically define those as constants. So I'm going to have a radius, which is going to be a 200, which is the circle that you just saw. I'm also going to have another constant, which is going to be my circle center part. So I'm going to store that, and that is going to be at the 300 mark, which is exactly right in the middle of my canvas since it's 600 by 600. Guess what the Y coordinate is going to be for it? It's going to be also 300 since it's 600 by 600. I'm also going to want to have a reference to my canvas so that I can draw on it. Also the context, which is going to be all of the methods and properties used to manipulate the canvas. Because I'm tracking mouse positions, I'm going to create a class so that I can store both the X and Y positions for the mouse inside of a class. And to do that, I just go constructor. It's going to get an X and Y set to it. And then I can say this, referring to the mouse position object that I create. Set the X to whatever the X is, and then once again set the Y to whatever the Y is for its position. I'm then going to create a mouse position object, and again just stores X and Y positions for the mouse. So we'll go new and mouse position, and I'm going to start it off with the 00 mark, because that works good. Then what else am I going to need to do? Well, whenever the web page completely loads, I'm going to need to draw my canvas on the screen. How you do that is you go document, add, event, listener, and then what it'll do is whenever the web page is fully loaded, which is going to be defined here when DOM content loaded, whenever the web page is loaded, we are going to set up or draw our basic canvas, which is just going to be the squares, the circles, and the lines that you saw. And that's basically it. So now what I want to do is think about all of the functions I'm going to need, and I'm going to go back and look at our finished application. Alright, so how this began was a drawing on a piece of paper. So what we're going to do is look at what we have here and then figure out all of the different functions we'll need. Well, first off, I want to, if we reload this, you will see that I have a square that goes around the outside of the canvas. I have two lines and I have a circle. So basically what I want to do is go and create a function that's going to draw that square, draw those lines, and draw that circle. Then what else am I going to need to do? Well, I'm basically going to need to constantly track the mouse position, which we already discussed. I'm also going to have to redraw the canvas every single time the mouse moves. I am going to need to draw a rectangle on our screen. I'm going to need to go and draw lines on our screen and circles. I'm going to need to put text on the screen, so I need a function for that. And you could normally write these things down if you want to get the best out of this tutorial and understand my overall thought process on creating this application. Another thing I'm going to need to do is go and be able to figure out what this angle is here on our triangle. I'm going to need to be able to convert from degrees to radians and from radians to degrees. And also I'm going to have to be able to draw triangles, obviously, and then calculate the lengths of the hypotenuse, which is this part of our triangle, as well as the opposite, which is the line going downwards, which is opposite of the angle here. So now I need to go over into the code and model all that. All right, so now I just need to come in here and create all of our functions and then slowly build up everything from that point on. So I'm just going to define the functions that I need. So I need a function that is just going to set up everything. Mainly it's going to define the canvas, and then it's going to create an event listener that is going to listen for mouse movements. Another function that I'm going to need is to draw the canvas, and that is just going to be the square around the outside, the circle, and the lines. After that, I'm going to need to redraw the canvas, which is going to happen every single time the mouse moves. So redraw canvas. And I'm not going to worry about the parameters that these functions are getting yet. I'm also going to need to be able to draw rectangles. So draw rectangle. I'm going to draw circles as well. And I could go and just use all of the functions that are built in to JavaScript to do all this, but I want to keep all of my code very, very manageable. And if I only have one or two functions, the code is going to be completely unmanageable and pretty much worthless. I'm going to have to draw lines. I'm going to have to draw text, and I'm going to call this draw text at point. I'm going to have to get the mouse positions. So get mouse position. Also get the angle using both my X and Y positions. So I know I'm going to need X and Y for that. So I'm just going to throw that in there just because it's something that I know I need. I'm going to have to convert from radians to degrees. So function and radians to degrees. And I'll cover more about what that is, and it's just going to receive a radian and it's going to convert it into degrees. Likewise, I'm going to need to convert from degrees to radians, and that's going to get a degree passed into it. And also I'll have to be able to, whoops, make sure I spell everything right. I'll have to be able to draw triangles. And let's just call it draw triangle. Well, I'm going to have to be able to get line lengths so that I'll be able to calculate the length of the hypotenuse and the opposite line. Okay, so those are all the functions that I'm going to need, and now I'm going to step through and go and create each of them. All right, so now what am I going to do? I'm just going to start from the top here and work my way to the bottom. So what is setup canvas going to do? Well, it's going to set up. It's not going to draw the canvas. So what does that mean? It's going to come in and get a reference to the canvas. And how you do that is you go document, get element by ID. And if you remember over in the HTML right here, you can see canvas. My canvas is the name of the ID that I want to reference. So I'm going to go and put my canvas inside of it. Then, once I have that set up, I need to go and get the context also set up. You can see I initialized them up here. And the context is going to give all the methods and properties that I need to be able to work with my canvas and draw on it. So how you get that is you go get context. And I'm going to be drawing in 2D, so I'm going to put 2D inside of there. So I got that set up. Then I'm going to call a specific function called draw canvas. That's going to draw the canvas the way that it looks whenever the web page first loads. And then after that, I am going to add an event listener that is going to specifically listen for a mouse movement. And so I'll say mouse move. And every single time the mouse moves, it's going to call a function called redraw canvas, because the canvas needs to be redrawn, deleted, and then redrawn. Otherwise, it will draw over itself. So that's bad, and we don't want to do that. And that is it. Setup canvas is ready to go. So now we have draw canvas. What is it going to do? Is it going to receive anything? Don't think so. All it's going to do is set up the canvas whenever it first starts. So what are we going to have it do? We're going to have it draw a rectangle around the outside of the canvas whenever it first loads. After we do that, we're going to have it draw the circle in the middle of the screen. And then we're going to have it draw 2 lines. And those lines are going to be from the top to the bottom and from the side to side. So draw a line. So literally all it's going to do is draw this square around, rectangle around the outside, the circle, and these lines. Nothing else. So let's go in and let's actually create all these functions. So draw a rectangle. What are we going to need to draw a rectangle? Well, what sort of things might need to be passed inside of it? That's what we need to think about. So let's get ourselves some space so we can see a little bit better. Well, the different things that go into drawing a rectangle include our stroke color. So let's have that get there. We'll have the line width. We will also have the starting X value and the starting Y value, which will be in the upper left-hand corner of our rectangle. And then we'll also have the ending X and the ending Y, which is going to be in the bottom part of our rectangle. Then we are going to reference the context, and we're going to say the next time we draw something, we want to draw using the stroke color that is passed inside of it. So stroke color. And also we want to define that the line width is going to be equal to whatever the line width is that they passed inside of it. I'm also going to then draw the triangle. So context again, and stroke rectangle, and to do that you just say start X and start Y and end X and end Y, and that is how we draw a rectangle. Then what I need to do up here in draw canvas is just put that information in. So what do I want? I'm going to just use a gray color like you saw before. So I'm going to say 839192. I'm going to then define the line width, which is going to be 5. I'm going to define my upper left-hand corner, which is going to be 0 and 0. Bottom right hand is 600, 600. You might want it to save those as constants since they'll be used all the time. And that's all we need to do. And now we have our rectangle drawn. Now let's draw our circle. So draw a circle. What's it going to get? It's going to get a stroke color and a line width once again. And it's going to need a couple other different things though, because it is a circle. So it's going to need things like radius and center of circle to properly draw it. So I'm going to say that I am going to need the circle center, X, as well as the circle, the Y circle center also. I'm going to need a radius because it's a circle. We're going to define an arc, which is going to be an angle. And then we're going to have the ending arc, which is also going to be an angle. So I come in here and once again, context and stroke style to define what the color is going to be, and that's going to be the stroke color that they passed inside of it. I'm also going to come in and define the line width like we did before, and that's going to be the line width that they pass in. I'm also going to then start defining that I'm ready to start drawing my circle. How you do that is you say begin path, and then you start drawing it. And you draw it as an arc, and you say X circle center, so that's going to be the center for my circle, and Y circle center, the radius, the arc start, which is going to be the angle, which is going to be 0 is what it's going to be, and these are going to be done in radians, and a 0 radian is 0, and a like 180 degree radian is, or 180 degrees in radian is going to be equal to pi. 360 is 2 times pi. So arc end, and that is all that we are going to need for that. And then to actually draw the circle after you define everything, you call a function called stroke, and it will draw the circle. And so then I come back up inside of here and I call for the circle to be drawn. I'm going to have it be the same color as our rectangle. Its line width is going to be 1, however. For the center of it, I am going to use the circle constant that we have. I'm also then going to use the circle y center constant that we have. The radius is going to be the radius constant that we defined. I'm then going to say I want to start at 0 degrees and I want to continue on 2 times pi degrees, which is 360 degrees. That's how they work. And there you go. So now I drew a circle. And what's next? Well, I want to draw a line from the upper left-hand corner or from the upper middle to the bottom middle. So how is our draw a line function going to work? Well, guess what? It's also going to get a stroke color and a line width, a X start and a Y start for our line, and also an X end and a Y end so that we know where the line begins and ends. Then all we need to do is move to the start of the line. You go CTX move for that, and that is going to be wherever X start is that they defined, and Y start that is also defined. After that, CTX again, then I'm going to say line 2, and then I provide where the line is going to end. So once again, there we go. And then to actually stroke the line, you go CTX and stroke, just like we did with our circle. And that's how we draw lines. And we can save that, and then we have to come up here and go and call for it to draw it. So once again, we're going to be drawing or using the same color again. We're going to use line width of 1. So throw both of those in there again. We're going to define we want to start at the X circle center. So X circle center. And then we want to, for Y, have it be 0. So we're going to start at the top, go to the bottom. Then, after we do that, we're going to say that we want to start once again at the X circle center, and we want to go 600. So it's going to go from left to right across the screen. Then we'll draw another line, paste this inside of there, and this one is going to start at the Y circle center, but first I have to define X, so let's throw X inside of there, and then it's going to go to 600, and once again Y circle center. And there we go. Now we have all of our lines drawn. All right, so that is how we're going to call and have use for draw canvas. And now I need to start worrying about redraw canvas. But while I'm here, why don't I also come down here and figure out exactly how we're going to draw text. Basically, this is going to receive the text we want to draw and the X and Y position for drawing text. And then we're going to define the font that we want to use for our text. I'm going to say it's 15 pixels, and I'm going to use Arial. And then to actually draw the text on the screen, you call fill text. If you call stroke text, there we are. And then you pass inside of it text and the X and Y position where you want to draw it. So pretty cool stuff. All right, so now that we have all of that set, we can start working with redraw canvas, which is going to be called every single time the mouse moves. And basically what this guy is going to do is we're going to have to clear the canvas. So clear, rect, and we have to say where we want to start. We want to start from the top of the screen to the canvas width and the canvas height. And that's going to clear the canvas so that we will continue being able to draw. After that, I'm going to call draw canvas, which is going to basically draw in just the rectangles and all the basics of our canvas before we start doing anything else. Then I want to call for the mouse position object to be updated. So get mouse position, and that is going to have an event. And each time redraw canvas is called, because it is tied to an event listener, it's going to receive an event. I'm going to call that event EVT. And then what I want to do is after I get my mouse positions, I want to go and actually, well, we'll have to go and create the function get mouse position. So save that and get mouse position. What's get mouse position going to do? It's going to receive an event. So let's save that. Very first thing I want to do is get the canvas size and position relative to the web page. How you do that is you go canvas, dimensions, canvas, and then get bounding client rect, And what I can do with that now is get the canvas X and Y positions and store them inside of my mouse position object that I created. How I get them? First, I want to round down. So I'm using floor to round down. And then I go and get our event information, which is going to be client X, and then subtract from it the canvas dimensions left. And that is going to get me the X position for it. And then to get the Y position, I'm going to do basically the same thing. So get the Y position and store it so I can use it elsewhere. And I'm just going to put Y, and then this is going to be top. And that is how I'm going to be able to figure out my mouse position. However, I'm going to need to convert to our coordinate graph that we have set up. So I'm going to say the mouse position X is going to be whatever its value was minus 300. And then the mouse position Y is going to be equal to -1 times the mouse position Y, once again, minus 300. And then after I have all that set, I'm going to return my mouse position updated object. All right, now since I'm down here and I know how to convert from radians to degrees and from degrees to radians, I'm going to go and actually work this out and get it done with. So what I need to do is there is going to be an error that if the radians comes into this as negative, I'm going to need to change my results. So basically I need to correct a bottom error by adding a negative angle to 360 to get the correct results around the entire circle. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to say return 360 and plus the radian times 180 divided by pi. And I want to convert that to just 2 decimal places, and 2 fixed is going to do that for me. Otherwise, I don't need to add 360 to it, so I can just go and return this guy. So I'll say else, boom, and get rid of one of these parentheses, and that'll work. So this is the basic formula that I'm going to use to convert from radians into degrees. Okay, so that's all set up. And then I need to convert backwards from degrees to radians. And I don't need to do any corrections here. I can just go and get whatever the degrees is and multiply that times pi divided by 180. So now you know how to convert from degrees and to radians and from radians to degrees. Okay, so that's all set up. Let's come back up here to the top, back to redraw canvas, and we got the mouse position now. And what I want to do now is go and draw my X and Y coordinates using my updated mouse position settings. So I will go draw text at point, and I just go and get whatever the text is going to be. It's just going to be X followed with the mouse X position, and then where I want it to show up, which is going to be 15X, and Y is going to be 25. And then I'm going to do the same thing for our Y mouse position. So let's throw that inside of there, and Y, and then change this to Y, and then I'll add 20 to this so that there's plenty of room. And I should probably go and test and see if this is all working. Reload, and I see that the lines are not drawing and the text is not also popping up, so let's figure out why. So let's go to View and Developer Tools, and we can see over here CTX move is not a function, and that is at line 50. So let's go and correct that, line 50, and this should be set to move to. So let's save that, reload it, and we can see that we have our lines in there, but it still says uncut reference error, redraw canvas is not defined. So this is at line 19. Oh, and I went and had this be lowercase, and here I made it uppercase. So let's go redraw canvas, save that, reload it, and not only is the X and Y positioning showing up here, but we're also getting our basic canvas. So everything's going good. So now let's get back to our code, and we're in redraw canvas. And what else do we need to do? Well, basically we need to get the angle in degrees and also draw that text on the screen. So how we're going to do that is angle of mouse, and this is going to be in degrees, and we're going to get that from a function called getAngle using x and y. And right about now is where I have to jump over and teach you some trigonometry, or at least review some trigonometry before we can create this project or create this function. So here is getAngle using x and y, and now let's figure out how to do that. Okay, so basically trigonometry deals with calculating sides and angles of triangles, and it's the basic foundation of geometry. So basically how it works here is sine and cosine and tangent are going to be found by dividing the sides of a right triangle in different ways. So if we want to get sine, and this is going to represent the degree, you go and get opposite, which is this, and divide it by hypotenuse. And cosine would be adjacent and hypotenuse, and opposite and adjacent for tangent. And what's important here is that basically as angles change, the ratios are going to stay the same. So we can find angles if we know sides, and sides if we know angles. And this is how those calculations would be used to find that this is a 45-degree angle, and this is a 45-degree angle, and this is a 45-degree angle. And you can see here with this example where we're trying to find the opposite, this line right here, the length of that, what we would do is if we know the angle's 45, we can then, this is going to work out to 0.7071, the sine of 45, and then we go and just flip over by multiplying 1.414 times this value over here to find what the opposite length is, which comes back as 0.999, which rounds up to 1. Okay, so that's how we perform that calculation. However, the arc versions of these functions are going to provide inverse values. So what happens if we know the lengths of the sides, but we do not know what the angle is? Well, what we do is we take the arctangent of opposite divided by adjacent to find said angle. And you can see right here that that works out to 45. Likewise, we can see here that if we go and take 0.785, which is in radians, and multiply it times 180 divided by pi, that we'll get 45 degrees as an answer. And likewise, as we saw before, if we want to take degrees and convert it into radians, we just multiply that times pi times 100, or divided by 180. All right, so basically what I need to do is this opposite is going to represent the y point, and the adjacent is going to represent the x point. Now, if I know both the x and the y, I will be able to then figure out what the degrees is. And I'm going to jump over into the code and show you exactly how to code that. So get angle using x and y. Well, in this situation, just to make sure it's 100% enforced, we're going to know that x is going to give us the value of the adjacent side, and y is going to give us the value of the opposite side. So let's just go and code that. So I wouldn't have to do this. I could just go and use the x and y that are passed in, but I want to do it just so that it's more understandable. So I'm going to say opposite is equal to y. Then, if I want to be able to figure out what the angle is based off of the opposite and adjacent length, I'm going to say return, and I'll say radians to degrees, which is the function that converts from radians into degrees, because all of the functions, trig functions inside of JavaScript use radians. So if I want degrees, then I need to convert it. So then I'll say math, and arctangent is that guy right there, and I pass inside of it opposite and adjacent. And that is how we figure out, using x and y, what the angle is. So we can get rid of that, and get rid of that, and come back up here again. So here is redraw canvas. And now I can say draw text at point, and pass inside of it degrees, and then go angle of mouse degrees, and then say that I want to go 15x and 65y, and throw that information onto our screen. So there we go. Now we're getting most of the information that we want. The only thing we have to do now is figure out how to draw triangles. And we are going to be able to calculate the hypotenuse and the opposite sides, and draw them on the screen. So all that I need to draw a triangle is the angle of the mouse in degrees. So we'll just pass that in. Angle of mouse in degrees. All right, cool stuff. So we got redraw canvas all set up. So here is draw triangle, and it is going to be receiving angle in degrees. I'm just putting that in there so that I know whenever I need to convert it into radians. So very first thing I want to do is draw the hypotenuse. How I do that is I go CTX and move to, and I'm going to go X, circle, center, and Y, circle, center. After I do that, I am then going to need to figure out what my endpoint is, and cosine is going to be equal to adjacent divided by hypotenuse. As you may remember from the slides, you might want to rewind the video to see that. So what I'm going to have to do here, the formula that we need to use to figure out what the endpoint is I'm going to go X end point is equal to X and circle center plus the radius, whoops, this is radius, times math cosine. I'm going to convert from degrees to radians, and then I'll pass in angle degrees. And that is going to give me my endpoint. Now, if I want to get the Y version of that, I'm just going to come in and go Y. Actually, it's extremely similar, so let's just go and copy this, just so you can see how similar it is. So I'll say Y endpoint. Well, if you want to get the Y endpoint, you're going to use the Y circle center. Radius is going to stay the same. However, we are going to be using sine in this situation, and we're going to have to make that negative. So let's throw a parentheses around it, and then that's set. Now, since I am inside of here, I might as well go and draw text in regards to radians on the screen. So I'll say draw text at point, and I'll have radians. I can say degrees to radians, pass in my angle degrees, and I'm going to shorten that to just 2 decimal places with 2 fixed. After that, I'm going to say 15 and 85 for the X and Y position to draw the text, and that's set. Now that I have that text written on the screen, I can then go and say that I want to continue drawing my line to the X endpoint and the Y endpoint. I need to call CTX stroke now to actually draw the line after I set the beginning and the end. Now I need to draw the opposite line. To do that, I just go move to, and it's going to continue where the endpoint was, X endpoint, and the Y endpoint. And then I basically just need to draw back towards the X axis on our grid. So CTX and line 2, and the X endpoint is not going to change, and the Y is always going to be 300. So we're just drawing to the axis on our screen. And this is line 2, not line ton. All right, so we have those drawn. And then CTX stroke again to actually draw the line. What else do we need to do for our triangle? Well, I want to draw text at the X and Y position on our triangle so that we will be able to see the X and Y position on our canvas. So I'm going to say draw text at point, and with this guy, I'm going to put parentheses around it, and then follow that up with X endpoint. Let's go and shorten it to 2 decimal places. And then let's go and put a comma before we go and put the Y point inside of it. Y endpoint. Again, 2 fixed to give it 2 decimal places. And then close off the parentheses that are going to be displayed. And then where I want that to be placed is going to be X endpoint. And then I'm going to add a little bit to it so that it's separated from that actual point. And then Y endpoint. And in this situation, I'm going to subtract 10 from it, again, to create separation from the end of the triangle. And now what I need to do is calculate the hypotenuse length. And I'm going to use the getLength function to do that. And the function for getting the length of a line is to take the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And that's how we'll get the total length for each of our lines. So what I need to do here is say let, and I'll say x's is equal to whatever x2 is minus x1. And this guy is going to be passed x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. So we'll get the x's for that. Then I'm going to say xs is equal to xs squared. I'm going to do the same thing for the y's. So let's just change all these x's to y's right here. Got all of those all set. And then after I do that, what I can do is return math square root xs plus ys. And that's going to give us the length of the hypotenuse and the opposite, or whatever line you want to measure. So let's get the hypotenuse length. I'm going to say let, and we'll call this hypotenuse length is going to be equal to, and I'm going to go get line length, pass inside of it, x circle center, y circle center, and then the x endpoint and the y endpoint. Now I can go and do draw text at point once again so that the user will see that. So I'll just go hypotenuse length plus and hypotenuse length, go and shorten it to 2 decimal places, 15. I think this is 105 at this point, just for spacing. And that's set. Now we got the hypotenuse length. And let's go and do the same thing for the opposite length. And that's going to be equal to get line length. And with this guy, we go x endpoint, y endpoint, and x endpoint, and 300. And then we can go and print that out also. And let's just change this to opposite. And this is going to be opposite length. And then change this, add 20 to it, and that's set also. And as far as I know, that's all the code I need. Reload. Any errors? Yes, there are. Reference error, degrees is not defined, so this is at 85. Line 85. Oh, this is degrees. Well, degree, let's just change that to degree. Reload again, and it looks like it's working perfect. So there you go, guys. Pretty crazy tutorial. Hopefully you learned a lot from it. Wanted to give you a really original, cool looking project to work on. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.